Have you ever thought about how a rainstorm could change history? We're going to be talking about that on Meteorology Matters today.
Sounds interesting.
It all starts with something called the Tempest Stela.
Okay.
It's a 3,500-year-old stone block from Egypt, and it might be the oldest weather report in the world.
The really interesting part is this inscription.
Yeah.
It doesn't just talk about like little rain shower.
Right.
It describes this huge event.
Wow.
A sky that's just constantly in turmoil.
Huh.
And lots of scholars think that it's connected to a massive volcanic eruption.
The imagery on the stela is really amazing. It talks about this relentless storm,
Right.
a sky louder than the cries of the masses,
Wow.
and even bodies being swept along the Nile.
It paints quite a picture.
Yeah, it's a chilling look into a really chaotic past.
It really is.
So the main theory is that this crazy weather came from the eruption of Thera.
Right.
The volcano we know today is Santorini.
Exactly.
Around 1600 BC, this volcano erupted with a force unlike almost anything in human history.
It's hard to even imagine.
And the effects of that eruption would have been felt far and wide.
Definitely.
And Egypt probably got hit really hard.
Yes, very likely.
So, okay, we've got a volcano erupting in the Mediterranean Sea
Okay.
and causing this disastrous weather in Egypt.
Uh-huh.
But how is that even possible over such a huge distance?
Well, you see, volcanic eruptions,
Okay.
they can throw up these huge amounts of ash and gases
Right.
high up into the atmosphere,
Okay.
and that can mess up weather patterns all over the world.
Oh, wow.
And what's really interesting here is
Yeah.
that there's emissions.
Go.
They were full of sulfur dioxide,
Huh.
and that's particularly good at blocking sunlight
Uh-huh.
and changing how air circulates in the atmosphere.
Okay.
So that could have set off this whole chain reaction,
Right.
leading to changes in the big weather systems that control Egypt's climate.
That's amazing.
It is.
So is there anything else besides the inscription itself
Oh.
that supports this connection
Absolutely.
between the eruption and what happened on the stela?
Well, the inscription itself, it talks about things that would happen after a big eruption, like
Yeah.
messed up weather,
Right.
tons of rain,
Uh-huh.
and flooding everywhere.
And there's another Egyptian document
There is.
from the same time period
That's right.
called the Rhind Mathematical Papyrus.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
And it also talks about a time of crazy thunder and rain
Oh, wow.
during the rule of Pharaoh Ahmose,
Interesting.
the same pharaoh named on the Tempest Stela.
So we've got two separate texts,
We do?
both hinting at some pretty wild weather during Ahmose's time.
Right.
I can see why scholars are so interested in this.
Yeah, for sure.
So you want to know more about how the Thera eruption
Okay.
could cause those specific weather events in Egypt?
Yeah.
Even though they're so far apart.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
That's a good point.
The distance is really significant.
It is.
So how did that happen?
Well, the key is understanding this thing called the Red Sea Trough.
Okay.
It's the main weather pattern in the area,
Right.
and it usually brings this hot, dry air to Egypt,
Okay.
all the way from East Africa. But when something messes with this system,
Uh-huh.
it can cause heavy rainfall and flash floods.
And those are the exact kinds of things that are described on the Tempest Stela.
Yes.
So are you saying that the Thera eruption messed with this Red Sea Trough system?
That's the main idea.
Okay.
And that's what caused those catastrophic storms in Egypt.
Scientists have looked at the information on the stela
Right.
and compared it to the known weather patterns,
Hmm.
and they found a really strong connection
There is.
to the kind of disruption that a volcanic eruption as big as Thera's could cause.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
It does.
So we have this ancient inscription,
We do.
maybe the world's oldest weather report,
Quite possibly.
and it could actually change our understanding of history.
It's really interesting.
Is there a specific way
Wow.
that this weather report could rewrite history?
It all depends on the timeline.
Oh, okay.
Most people think that Ahmose ruled around 1550 BC.
Right.
But if the Tempest Stela is really describing what happened after Thera,
Yeah.
and we know Thera erupted somewhere between 1621 and 1605 BC,
Uh-huh.
then Ahmose's reign would have to be moved back
Okay.
30 to 50 years earlier.
So one volcanic eruption
Right.
and this ancient weather report
Could change everything.
could completely change how we see ancient history.
It's definitely a possibility,
Wow.
and it would have big implications.
Yeah, like what?
Well, moving the dates of Ahmose's reign
Yeah.
could have a ripple effect.
Okay.
It could change our understanding of other major events in the ancient world.
Give me an example.
Well, like the fall of the Canaanites, the
Yeah.
collapse of the Babylonian Empire.
Uh-huh.
All of those events would have to be looked at again
Right.
within this new timeline.
That's incredible.
It is pretty amazing.
But are there other ways to interpret the Tempest Stela?
Of course.
It seems like a really big change
It is.
in how we understand history.
You always have different opinions in history.
Right.
Some researchers think that the text might be a metaphor
A metaphor for what?
for the Hyksos invasion of Egypt.
Okay.
They were a foreign dynasty that ruled parts of Egypt before Ahmose.
Mm-hmm.
So these researchers think it's not about a real weather event,
Okay.
but the detailed descriptions of the weather,
Oh, right.
especially that phrase sky in constant storm,
Yep.
and the possibility that it lines up with the Thera eruption,
Right.
all of that makes a really strong argument
It does.
that it is a real record of an amazing weather event.
This is all so fascinating.
It is.
It really makes you think about
Yeah.
how weather has affected human history.
Definitely.
I wonder if there are other historical events that would make sense if we looked at them
Yeah.
from a weather perspective.
I'm sure there are. There are tons of examples.
The-
The one that always comes to mind is the year 1816.
Okay.
It's called the year without a summer
Oh, wow.
in Europe and North America.
What happened?
Crops died, temperatures dropped, and there was this weird haze in the air.
That sounds awful.
It was. And the cause was the eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia,
Really?
one of the biggest volcanic eruptions ever recorded.
It's incredible how a volcano on one side of the world
Right.
can cause such crazy weather changes across the globe.
It really is.
And what's really interesting is how this year without a summer
Uh-huh.
seems to have inspired Mary Shelley to write Frankenstein.
It's a fascinating connection.
Right.
You don't often think about how unrelated events can be linked like that.
So Mary Shelley was on vacation in Switzerland
Okay.
during that time.
Right.
And the weather was so cold and dreary
Uh-huh.
that everyone had to stay inside.
Makes sense.
And to keep themselves entertained,
Okay.
they decided to have a contest to see who could write the scariest ghost story.
And that's how Frankenstein was born.
Exactly.
It makes you think about how many other creative works throughout history might have been influenced by the weather.
That's a really cool thought.
Maybe Shakespeare's plays about storms
Yeah.
were inspired by a really rough winter in England.
Or Van Gogh's paintings. With
Exactly.
all those bright colors
Yeah.
could reflect a beautiful sunrise after a volcanic eruption.
It adds a whole new dimension to how we understand art and literature.
Absolutely.
And it goes back to what we were saying before
Right.
about looking at history through the lens of weather.
It's amazing what we might discover.
Who knows what other hidden connections are out there?
Speaking of events with a global impact,
Okay.
let's talk about something that's causing a lot of debate right now.
What's that?
Mega constellations of satellites.
Ah, you mean the huge increase in satellite launches?
Exactly.
With companies like SpaceX putting up thousands of satellites for their Starlink network? Yeah, that's a big one.
And while having internet everywhere sounds great,
Sure,
there are some growing concerns
there are.
about what might happen with so many objects up in orbit.
It's true. Starlink gets a lot of attention
It does.
because they're launching so many satellites.
Right. Tens of thousands.
But they're not the only ones.
Oh, right.
Lots of other companies and countries
Yep.
are launching their own satellite constellations too.
So space is getting pretty crowded.
It's getting a lot more crowded.
So what are the main worries about these mega constellations?
Mhm.
Is it just that there's not enough space?
Well, overcrowding is a big problem.
Okay,
The more objects you have up there,
Right.
the higher the risk of collisions.
that makes sense.
And every time there's a collision,
Yeah.
it creates a bunch of debris,
Mm-hmm.
which just makes things even more dangerous.
So it's like a chain reaction
Exactly.
that could make space too risky
It
for
could.
future missions.
It's a really concern.
That's like a giant game of billiards in space,
Kinda.
but with much higher stakes.
Definitely.
So are there any other worries besides collisions?
Yes, light pollution is another big one.
Oh, light.
These satellites reflect sunlight back to Earth, especially around dawn and dusk, and that messes with astronomical observations.
So astronomers are already dealing with light pollution from cities and towns,
They are.
and now they have to worry about these mega constellations too.
Exactly.
It could make it harder to study and understand the universe.
Yeah, that's the worry.
It's a shame because those incredible images from space telescopes
Yeah.
have really changed how we see the cosmos.
They have.
It would be awful
Yeah.
if they were ruined by light pollution.
It would.
And it's not just professional astronomers who are affected.
Right.
It's amateur stargazers too.
Definitely.
And people who like to take pictures of the night sky.
everyone who enjoys looking at the stars.
The night sky belongs to everyone.
It does.
And these mega constellations are changing it.
They are.
In ways that a lot of people are worried about. And rightfully so.
So we've got potential collisions, light pollution.
Right.
What else should we be concerned about?
Well, there's also the long-term impact on the space environment itself.
Okay.
More and more satellites means more and more space debris.
And that makes it harder to launch future missions.
It does make it hard.
And more dangerous, too.
Much more dangerous.
This debris can stay up there for hundreds of years.
It can.
It's a hazard to spacecraft and satellites.
It's a serious problem.
It seems like we're at a crossroads.
I think we are.
On one hand, these satellite constellations could be really beneficial.
Yeah, like giving internet access to remote areas.
Exactly.
That's a huge plus.
But on the other hand, they could be dangerous to the space environment, to astronomy, and even to the future of space travel.
So how do we deal with this?
It's a complicated issue.
It is.
That needs a lot of thought.
We need to find a way to balance
Okay.
the advantages of new technology
with the responsibility of protecting our skies.
and making sure that space exploration can continue.
For future generations.
This is going to require countries working together,
Definitely.
responsible regulations,
Sure.
and finding creative solutions.
That minimize the negative impacts of these mega constellations?
It's clear that something as simple as launching a satellite
Right.
can have huge consequences.
It can.
That go way beyond our planet.
And it shows how important it is to make thoughtful decisions and to realize that everything we do is connected.
Well said.
The challenges of these mega constellations are big.
They are.
But they also give us a chance to rethink how we approach space exploration.
I like that.
And to come up with a better plan for what we do out there.
A plan that's more sustainable.
Exactly.
And more responsible.
Yes.
But for now, let's come back down to Earth.
Okay.
And keep exploring how weather has shaped human history.
Sounds good.
Are there any other historical events that you find particularly interesting?
Let me...
From a meteorological perspective.
Oh, absolutely. One that comes to mind is the Spanish Armada.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
In 1588, King Philip II of Spain, he sent this huge fleet of warships to invade England.
Wow.
They thought the Armada was unbeatable.
Really?
But then a bunch of storms hit and scattered the ships, and that really helped to lead to their defeat.
That's a perfect example of how weather can change military campaigns.
It really is.
It makes you wonder how many battles throughout history were influenced or even decided by unexpected weather.
It's fascinating to think about.
Like, what if the wind had been blowing the other way?
Yeah.
Could the Spanish Armada have won? Could European history have been completely different?
It's a really interesting question.
It seems like even the strongest armies and navies are still at the mercy of Mother Nature.
They are.
But it's not just these big historical events that are shaped by weather.
That's true.
Our individual lives are affected by weather, too.
Definitely, weather affects our everyday routines.
Right.
Our moods, even our long-term plans.
That's true.
It shapes the landscapes we live in,
the
food we grow, and how we connect with each other.
Weather is a part of everything we do.
It is.
From the clothes we wear to the stories we tell.
We often take it for granted
until
something unexpected happens.
Yeah.
And sometimes those unexpected things can change our lives forever.
Like what?
Think about hurricanes, droughts,
Okay.
extreme heat waves.
Right.
These events can force people to leave their homes, disrupt entire economies, and leave lasting damage on communities.
It's a reminder that we're all connected to the natural world.
In ways we don't always understand.
And that brings us back to why meteorology is so important.
Yes.
Understanding weather patterns.
Right.
Being able to predict extreme events. And adapting to a changing climate.
Yeah. These are all crucial for our well-being and our future.
Meteorology isn't just about knowing if you need an umbrella anymore.
It's not.
It's about understanding these really complex systems.
Definitely.
Analyzing data. And sharing important information that can help us make smart decisions.
And protect our planet.
Exactly.
It's a field that's always changing.
It is.
Pushing the limits of science and technology. And if you're interested in learning more about weather and history, you should check out Rob Jones.
Oh, I know Rob.
He's a meteorologist who loves making weather fun and easy to understand.
He does great work.
You can find him on Instagram as meteorologist.
Okay.
On TikTok as TV meteorologist.
Got it.
And on YouTube, his channel is Rob Jones Hurricane.
He's got lots of great content.
He does. And you can also find the Meteorology Matters podcast playlist on his YouTube channel.
So we've gone from ancient inscriptions to mega constellations,
It's been quite a journey.
from volcanic eruptions to famous works of literature.
We've explored all these fascinating ways that meteorology has shaped our world.
And continues to shape it today.
It does.
It's been a really eye-opening discussion.
It has.
And as we move forward, it's so important to stay informed,
Absolutely.
to appreciate the power of nature,
For sure.
and to remember that everything on our planet is connected.
Well said.
Until next time, keep an eye on the sky.
Yes.
And never underestimate the power of a good storm.